Design review.
There he
Oh,
is.
there's Jeff, just in time.
I'm going to call the design review committee to order. Can we have roll call, please?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm in the office, so there might be a little bit of background noise. So committee member Baranek. Here. Committee member Schmidt. I can see that you're here.
Dennis, you're muted.
Yeah.
He looks
Committee member Vanden Eyck.
here.
Vice Chairperson Funk.
Here.
Chairperson Newsom.
Here.
All present.
All right.
Thank you.
Can I get approval of the agenda?
Move approval?
I'll second.
Need roll call.
Okay. Vice Chairperson Funk.
Yes.
Committee member Vanden Eyck.
Yes.
Committee member Baranek.
Yes.
Committee member Schmidt.
Lost him.
Okay. Chairperson Newsom.
Yes.
I will say that's a 5-0. I'm assuming that Dennis said yes, but I just didn't hear him. Did any of you hear him?
No, but we can confirm it when he comes back online.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. At this time, I'm going to open it to public comment. Public comment is going to be anything unrelated to the two agenda items. If we have anybody that is in the attendees that's wanting to speak, please raise your hand. And if we have callers, what is it, star?
Star 9, if you're on the phone, to raise your hand.
Raise your hand, please press star 9 if you're on the phone and want to speak. We got, looks like Heather Lewis.
All right.
There you go.
Yeah, that was an accidental hand raising. So thank you, though.
Okay, we know you're here. All right. Do we have anybody else that's wanting to speak for an item unrelated to the two agenda items? Go over my list of attendees. I don't see anybody. Luke, do you have anybody?
Luke is helping Dennis right now, but I'm not seeing him either.
Okay. All right. I guess we're going to close public comment. We're going to go on to the consent calendar. Can I get approval of the October 14th draft minutes?
I would move approval with one correction. Please remove the parenthetical phrase "excuse absence" from behind my name.
Okay. Did you get that on it?
I did.
All
I'll
right.
second that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, roll call. Vice Chairperson Funk.
Yes.
Committee member Vanden Eyck.
Yes.
Committee member Baranek.
Yes.
Committee member Schmidt. We'll check with him on that again, I guess, when he is up and running. And then Chairperson Newsom.
Yes.
So motion passes 5-0.
Okay. Now we'll move on to our two development projects. First one is going to be design and neighborhood compatibility review of an existing colonial home at 5690 Traffic Way. And I'm assuming you're going to present, Mariah?
Yeah, go ahead and share my screen.
Go ahead.
Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so this project is at 5690 Traffic Way. The permit. Annette, would you mind muting real quick? Sorry. Would you mind muting? Thank you. This is at 5690 Traffic Way. The permit number is PRE 20-0093. And again, this is for an addition to a colony home that's in the multifamily zoning district. So it needs to go before the design review committee today. So here we can see an aerial view I'm sure a lot of you are probably familiar with this house because it is pretty iconic in the city. It's a beautiful colony home on the corner of Traffic Way and Olmeda. You can see the colony house is tucked back a little bit more on the property, and the proposed building is to be located along the Olmeda side. So here's just a look at the zoning map. It is in the high density zoning district, and across the street is, I believe that's the teen center. I think that's the Colony Park Teen Center. And the property itself is 0.41 acres.
I think that's the Armory that's directly
Is
across
it?
from it.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Thank
then
you
the
for the
teen center
correction.
is the next property further up at the top of the screen as we would see it.
Okay, thank
On
you
the
for
right.
the correction. That was my first thought, but then I second guessed. Okay, it's across from the Armory. A little bit of background about the property. It is actually a significant home within the city. The house itself, the existing house, is 1,577 square feet, and it was built in 1916. This was actually built by F.O. Engstrom for his personal residence while he was building the actual Atascadero City Hall administration building. This colony home, because of its significance, is often part of the city's historic colony home tours when those are going. And it's of significance because of the quality of preservation, but also the importance of who built it and lived there. So here's just the view from Traffic Way. You can see it has very distinct colony home features. The groupings of windows, the large porch, the dormer on top. It's very in character with the colonial style. So the project being proposed is a 928 square foot detached building. This will include a garage as well as a residential unit. Since this is a multifamily property, it's not technically considered an ADU. It's actually a second residential unit. And so the breakup of the building, it's a 520 square foot garage and then a small 408 square foot unit. And here's just a look at the site plan. You can see a little bit better where that existing colony home is and then where that second unit will be. It's much closer to Olmeda Avenue, so that's primarily the focus of the design is on the front on Olmeda. And here's just a picture of the actual site of where that will be located. So I'll just skip ahead to the actual elevations. You can see this is very in keeping with that colonial home style. It has those groupings of hung windows, even that carriage door used for the garage. It also includes a pergola above the front door, asphalt shingles, and then some decorative fiberboard shakes here, as well as a decorative gable bracket on the sides here. So the owner has worked really hard to take our guidance and make sure that the new residence is really in keeping with what's there, since it is such an important historical home in the city. So this would be the view from Olmeda. This would be the view if you're looking at it from the Traffic Way side, but as we saw on the site plan, it is pretty far from Traffic Way. And then that top picture, I'm sorry, now I'm getting turned around. So this is the Olmeda side, this is the southern property line. This would be actually the northern property line, so that's facing the existing home. And then the east elevation there, that would be the one that's facing Traffic Way. So you can see it includes a lot of details since that will be one of the sites that's primarily seen. Just taking a look at the floor plan, you can see it is a very small unit in the back there with the garage taking up the majority of the space. The municipal code, since it is a multifamily lot, requires these zoning districts to have a minimum landscaped area of 25%. The applicant has kept the space on the site in the setbacks, and there's plenty of room on the site to landscape. And there is some landscaping there already. So that'll be one of the conditions of the basically on the building permit will be to submit a landscape and irrigation plan with their building permit submittal, just to make sure that they're in keeping with this 25% landscaped area. So staff, we actually really like this design. The applicant has done we think, a really good job of respecting the integrity of the historic home and keeping those qualities for the new residents. So we are bringing this before the design review committee. We don't have any specific recommendations, but we want to make sure that the design review committee is comfortable with the design, since it is a colony home on a multifamily property. And so that's the only discussion item, is just to talk about the architectural design and make sure that it's compatible with that existing colony home. And staff is available for questions.
Thank you, Mariah. Does any of the committee members have questions for the staff?
I do.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I think, Mariah, I think you actually have the elevations incorrect, because I think the one you're showing right now is the one facing traffic. Based on the plan layout, because the garage doors are facing towards traffic, and that's what we would see right there.
The garage doors, I believe they're facing toward Alameda. Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. That is facing toward traffic way. I apologize.
Okay.
So yes, this is the traffic way elevation. Thank you, Jeff. I apologize for that. This would be facing traffic way. This would be facing the next residential property on Alameda, and then these would be facing either side. So that east elevation would be facing the house, and then that west elevation would be facing Alameda. Thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions from the committee members?
Yeah, just a couple. The I'm curious, we've got a garage, a sizable garage with a bathroom. Is the intent to convert that into a junior ADU in the future? And could that be done if authorized? I mean, if this owner or a future owner wanted to add another unit, could they do that as a junior ADU?
They couldn't do a junior ADU because those are supposed to be inside the primary residence, but this is a multifamily district. So they might be able to do other units on the property in the future. Do you know, Mariah?
Yeah, they could potentially convert it in the future to another unit. That's not the current owner's intent, but with the building permit, since it does have that bathroom, we would require them to record a deed restriction saying it won't be used as a residence unless they were to get building permits to permit it that way.
Okay, I mean, that I just wanted it, if it would be allowed under the current thing, that I would just wanted to check about whether parking could manage that, without destroying the beautiful historic nature of this fabulous property.
That's probably the biggest question. Yeah, it would be tight at that point to fit parking.
Yeah, but if that's the subject of a future question, we're good. And then, as I recall, there is on the north side of the property facing the next residence up, that would be looking at that, the view you just showed, that very flat with a little bit of articulation, that there's substantial landscape screening there already. Am I correct on that?
Yes, there is some landscaping between those two residences. Just for a little bit of background, and I'm sure the owner will elaborate on this as well. This isn't necessarily intended by this owner to be rented out to a separate family or whatnot. It's more going to be used for guests or for their own family. Just to give a little bit of background about this particular project.
Great, thank you. And then in the picture that you had, there was a lovely little white picket fence. Is that moving in the property? I'm assuming that the parking is accommodated without necessarily moving that fence.
That's my understanding. I think the owner could clarify that, but that's my understanding.
Okay. That's it for me.
Okay, Dennis, do you have any questions?
No,
Emily?
No, I don't.
Okay, I have one question. Is this the same property that removed the big tree, or was that tree on the other property line? I think it was dying anyways, but
Was this recently?
within the last 6 months, I think there was a tree removed out of this area.
I don't recall that one.
I know there was on the other side of Omida, a little bit further up the street. I don't believe it was this property, but it looks like the owner's raising her hand, so she can probably clarify that as well, but I don't think it was this one. I know there was one across the street.
Okay. I'll go ahead and let the owner speak, and then I'll open it up to public comment.
Okay.
Okay, hi, can you hear us?
Yes.
Hi,
Yes.
this is Lisa and Jeremy, and we're the
Hello.
owners.
Hello.
So, just 2 comments. The white picket fence that's in the area of the project, it's actually, you probably can't tell from the picture, it's quite decrepit. So we probably will have to remove that, but we will put something that, you know, matches the character. We do have an intent of having some kind of separation from the street and the property there. So that, and then the second thing about the tree, yes, we did have a lovely tree there, which I loved and tried to save with everything in us. But part of it, the summer fell down, and we had to have an emergency takedown, which we did have filed with the city. So, but yes, it knocked out part of that other tree that's there. So there was a tree, and you can kind of see it actually in that corner next to the CRV right there. So thanks for your time and review. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, at this time, I guess I'll go ahead and open it up to public comment. If anybody wants to speak, please raise your hand.
Heather, could we ask Dennis if he heard us when we approved the agenda and the minutes? Because I don't know if he said yes and we just didn't hear him or not on both of those items.
Sure. Dennis, can we do some housekeeping? We did the approval of the agenda and approval of the draft minutes, and didn't hear you, but saw you come and go. Did you want to give us your vote on both?
yes,
Is that good, Annette?
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks. Laugh about the joys of technology. That'll be everlasting. Okay. We'll go ahead and open it up to public comment. Does anybody want to speak or have at this time? All right, I'm looking at my list of attendees and panelists. I don't see anybody at this time. Luke, do we have any callers, or Mariah, do you see anybody that's called in that? I think we've got one caller, but
I do not see anyone raising their hand.
okay. All right, then I will go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the committee to discuss in your review of the architectural design and its compatibility with the area and the colonial home standards. Anybody want to speak to that? Emily?
I quite like the design. I think that site in that location on that site has needed something for a while. So this makes sense to me. And as long as the colors and materials are in keeping with the imagined quality. I know the Colony home's older, but I'm impressed. I think it'll look quite nice.
Thank you. Dennis?
no comments.
Okay. And Jeff?
I'm super familiar with this piece of property. Actually, one of our friends owned it previously, and right across the street from the Fine Arts Academy, where all my children went to. But I think that the architectural value of this is really good, and I'm totally for that project.
I too would agree that this property it's sticking with the ideas of what we want our community to continue to look like in this area. And I know you guys have done an amazing upkeep on it since you purchased it. And I think that you'll continue to stay with what we'd envisioned with our standards, and really look forward to seeing this additional addition. So I think at this point,
I think you missed Susan.
Yeah.
oh, sorry. You guys all don't fit on my screen anymore. It's so
Oh.
hard to go through them.
No, I just want to thank the owners for really thoughtful attention to designing something that looks like it will work very well in this beautiful and important historic property. And I want to thank staff for their attention to that and working with the owners as well. So I'm fully supportive.
Perfect.
And would be prepared to make a motion to review I guess we don't have, do you need a motion even?
Not necessarily a motion. If you don't have any specific comments, it sounds like the design review committee is comfortable with what was proposed. So applicant will just go ahead and move on to building permits.
Perfect.
Sounds great.
Thank you, Jeremy and Lisa, for being here. Okay. Going on to our next agenda item. It's going to be the Woods Humane Society Animal Facility expansion.
Thank you. Yes, that one's me as well. So let me get that pulled up here.
And I think we already have the applicants on as well.
And do we need to disclose ex parte? I was invited to a tour of the Woods Humane Society facility in San Luis Obispo and took that tour.
Okay, you don't have to for DRC, but you're welcome to.
Okay, very good.
And we've also heard this project before at DRC, I think in 2020.
Yes.
I was contacted by Marcia Torgerson, and it was discussed, and she invited me for a tour. I did not take that.
I was also invited, had planned to take the tour and then couldn't, but we did have some communications regarding it.
I also went, actually I missed Emily because she was supposed to be on the tour, but I got a one-on-one tour. That was really nice.
And I have yet to have my tour, but I have talked to Marcia as well, since we're all doing ex parte.
Okay, I will go ahead and begin then. Thank you. So this is, again, at the Woods Humane Society at 2300 Ramona Road. This is for an expansion of their existing facility. So here's an aerial view. It's on Ramona Road between the highway and then the Apple Valley residences abut the property in the rear. Then to the north there is a church, and then south is a vacant parcel. So the property is in the public zoning district, and then again, there's residential to the west there behind the property, and then the freeway over to the east. So a little bit of project background, and some of this might be a repeat of the previous hearing, but it's always a good refresher. So the original conditional use permit in 1997 was approved to establish an animal shelter for what was then the North County Humane Society. In 2002, that conditional use permit was amended to allow the addition of about 2,100 square feet or 2,100 square foot modular building. These conditions of approval for this project specifically prohibited the sheltering of dogs at the time, so it was just cats. In 2017, the conditional use permit was once again amended to include the Spay and Neuter clinic facilities. This was considered to be an animal hospital use, which is conditionally allowed in the zoning district. And then in September 2020, the design review committee had a discussion about the use of the property and whether it was more of a kennel use versus an animal hospital definition. And the design review committee all agreed that it was more consistent with the animal hospital definitions. This is kind of a weird use that falls between, and therefore that's the reason why it's moved forward and being considered a conditionally allowed use in the public zone. So to go into what's there now, there is about a 1,300 square animal intake facility. Again, it's just cats right now. A 2,300 square foot spay and neuter clinic, and then a 2,100 square foot cat shelter and a 600 square foot storage facility. These are all separate buildings on the site with 24 parking spaces. So the project being proposed is preserving that spay and neuter clinic. That's that newest building. That's about 2,300 square feet. And then the new project would develop a new 15,000 square foot facility. This would bump up the services that are currently offered at Woods, as well as expand not only for cat facilities, but also for dogs. This would also include new administrative offices and a classroom to bring different groups in, different classes, and actually have it used as a classroom. The site plan also includes 2 fenced-off outdoor dog exercise yards, and then they're relocating the parking a little bit to the front of the property right along Ramona Road, and then upping the number of spaces to 47 parking spaces. So just to go over what the design review committee had discussed previously, these are the definitions of kennel versus animal hospital. I went through and I re-listened to the design review committee just to get a refresher on what that conversation was. And all of the design review committee agreed that this would be considered more like an animal hospital because it is not a commercial business. You can't bring your dogs just to board them here. They're all indoors, and it was more consistent with the animal hospital definition. So I just want that to be a reminder of what the last hearing, the big discussion of the last hearing. So the design of the building is similar to their San Luis Obispo facility. I also took a tour of their San Luis facility, and they have this high quality architecture and materials incorporated in their new facility. This would be the view from Ramona Road, and we'll go over the colors and materials here. So the walls themselves would be these gray metal panels. This would be consistent, or it's probably best to show you this. This would be consistent with the existing spay and neuter facility that's staying. It would include stucco columns that are kind of an off-white color, as well as asphalt shingle roofing. So there is a little bit of a mix of colors and materials, and the metal wall panels give it a little bit more of an industrial appearance, but the shape and the roof lines keep it a little bit more classic. And so here are some more renderings. You can see a little bit more of an overview. So the building itself is actually kind of this U shape. And then this gray box here is the existing building that would be staying. And then we'll talk about it in a little bit, but this area you see in the middle here, this would be an outdoor area for the dogs to be able to be outside during certain times. And here are all of the elevations. So this top one again is the elevation facing Ramona Road. That bottom elevation would be the north elevation facing that existing 4-square church. The top elevation there would be facing that residential zone. And we'll talk a little bit about the setbacks and topography of that. And then the bottom elevation there is facing that vacant lot that's also zoned public to the south. So here we can see an overall site plan. This shows it a little bit better on the site, you can see the location of the parking for visitors is up here in the front. And then the parking back here is actually the staff and volunteer parking. Again, you can see the U shape of the building. There was a little bit of discussion about the sewer versus septic at the last design review committee hearing. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of update. The applicant is moving towards connecting the sewer down to the Apple Valley sewer connection here. This property is owned by the city, and there have been discussions about an easement over that property. So again, just another update about something that was talked about last time. I did just want to clarify the setbacks because it can be hard to see on a flat site here. So it's about 140 feet to the Ramona Road right-of-way, about 45 feet to the Foursquare Church parking lot, just about 14 feet from the existing vacant parcel there, about 110 feet to the property line from the actual building to the property line. And then just to clarify the distances to the nearest residences, it's about 150 feet to the nearest residence here. And then just to give a little bit more information, this outdoor dog area is about 225 feet from the nearest residence. So just to go over some of the setbacks. The project itself has been, there was some discussions, when adding dogs about noise during the last hearing. And so the applicant has incorporated these considerations into their design. I'm sure they can elaborate on everything that they're doing, but just looking at the site design, you can see that the dog exercise yard is enclosed within these buildings. So these buildings will actually act as a little bit of a buffer from that outdoor area. The actual dog areas where they'll be kept, the largest area is right here in the middle of the building. So there is a buffer. This would be the side facing the residences. And then there are some areas that dogs would be kept here. Just to clarify, the dog exercise area, I've been told, is only during certain controlled times. So it's not just an open area for the dogs to roam. They would be supervised times at certain points of the day. So that's how the applicant has tried to do some noise mitigation within their design. And I believe that's partially how it's based off of in San Luis, and I'm sure they can elaborate a little bit on that as well. Just to quickly talk about parking, the original use permit required 24 parking spaces. The use itself is being considered an office for parking purposes based on the visits and the use by employees. And that requires, I believe, 34 parking spaces for the office. They're providing 37, so they're actually a little bit over their required parking amount. I already went over the setbacks, but just to talk about how they relate to the municipal code. The municipal code requires a minimum setback for outside animal enclosures that are part of a kennel, which we're not calling this a kennel, but to be located a minimum of 25 feet from the property line. And we saw that the outdoor area for the dogs to run was over 200 feet, or over 100 feet. There's a 100-foot setback for animal husbandry facilities that board large animals, and 25-foot setback for any outside animals for short-term activities. Again, that outdoor area is more than 100 feet away. And that last point is just reiterating that. To go a little bit over the screening and fencing. So they are incorporating a variety of different fencing and screening techniques. This top fence up here, or the blue fence that you see actually around the whole front area here. This number 7 is a 6-foot tall decorative metal fencing. So that would be provide the security of a 6-foot tall fence, but also transparency. So it's not just looking like a wall from Ramona Road. And then as we move back, the fencing that starts about here, going back this green line, and then back along the back here, and then around here. This would be a 6-foot tall solid vinyl fence. So this would help to, again, mitigate a little bit of the noise concerns. It would provide an extra barrier, you know, as well as the building. There would be the 6-foot tall solid fence. One condition that staff would put on the conditional use permit is that this is not a stark white solid fence, but that it be a more neutral color, like a gray or a brown, to help it blend in and not stick out too much. And then the rest of the fencing around here, this number 8 red fencing you see, this is a vinyl coated chain link fencing. And so this area would be required to be fully screened by evergreen vegetation. So we can see it here, the existing property, I'm sorry, there's existing vegetation on the church property, but they would have to add some vegetation along here. Number 8, there are some tall trees here and a solid fence along this property line. And so that's just one of the conditions would be to screen all of the vinyl coated chain link fencing with evergreen vegetation. And here's a list. There's a variety of vegetation and trees used. And then we can see a few examples. There's that metal monumental fence, even the little dog there, a 6-foot tall vinyl chain link fence, and then a 6-foot tall solid fence. So there's some examples of the different kinds of fencing. And just to give you some pictures from what the site looks like today, the top picture there is a view looking onto woods. So you can see it's lined by trees right now, and it's actually a little bit hard to see from Ramona if you're not looking for it right now. That second picture is looking the opposite way, a little bit more onto the site. You can see the Spay and Neuter facility is in the front there, so the new building would be even further behind that. This top picture is just a picture of that Spay and Neuter facility. The bottom picture is the cat shelter that would be removed. And then I just wanted to show some pictures to show the relationship to the residential neighborhood, since that is one of the discussion topics. You can see the top fence here is existing, and then there's actually a pretty significant drop to the residents below. You can see that maybe a little bit better in the bottom picture. You can see it sloping kind of over here, and then this this chain link fence would be replaced with a solid 6-foot tall fence. And then lastly, I just wanted to show, again, to sort of depict the relationship with the residences below. They are significantly below as far as the topography. This is an older picture. This dome isn't here anymore, but this grass line, and you can see a little bit this fence here. This is where that new 6-foot tall fence would be placed. And so you can see it is higher than the existing residences here and a ways away. So just some discussion topics to for the design review committee are the site design. They did, again, try to mitigate any concerns about noise and try to be compatible with the surrounding uses and neighborhood. Any concerns or discussion about the fencing and screening of the site, and then just the overall architectural design and the features and materials used. And staff is available for questions.
Thank you, Mariah. Let's start with questions for staff from the committee members. Who wants to go first? Jeff.
I can go first. Can you hear me?
Oh, we'll let Dennis go first. Go ahead, Dennis.
I can hear you and I can see you.
All right.
I might have missed, was there a report on how many dogs would be allowed in the facility at one time?
I don't have those specifics. The way it actually functions, I'm sure Neil, he's the main Woods Humane man. He can go into all of those details, but I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. And does the facility have any open areas that would be permanent, like let's say where the kennels are there fenced areas versus solid areas? So noise, so air can blow through at nighttime or any other time of day.
I'm not sure how the air circulation comes and goes, but you can see the primary areas where the dogs are kept are internal. So it doesn't appear that there's any kind of windows necessarily. Maybe over here, but
it's been a while. I used to volunteer in San Luis Obispo, and the animal shelter, not Woods, next door is always very, very loud. Depending on how many animals are in there, but that facility has open areas that are open to the outside for ventilation. And so that's why my questions are, the letter from a neighbor, speaking of noise, is I can be very sympathetic with it with respect to my experience at the facilities in San Luis Obispo, and again, very, very loud. So I'm wondering how protected the area is from noises outside of normal operation hours. And then obviously the amount of animals can contribute to noise.
sure. And again, I know Woods will want to elaborate on this. I know when I went out to the facility, there was a pretty stark difference between the county's facility and Woods. Woods works really hard to have a low stress zone. I was actually even told they do aromatherapy for the dogs. So in addition to keeping them inside, they try to keep them as calm as possible. But the county's facility, it seems to be vastly different. And I'm sure Neil can elaborate on all of the ways that this facility is being designed differently.
Good. Thank you.
I actually don't have any questions for staff right now. Looks like Susan does, though.
Yes, I do.
About the time she has a question. There you go. Once you talk, you pop back up onto my screen. So go ahead, Susan.
Okay, I didn't know I was disappearing. I can see everybody's on mine. So what's the M and G yard?
Oh, I'm sorry. So the M&G yard is the meet and greet yard. So this is the dog exercise yard, but this is the area where if you're interested in meeting a dog, that's where they would bring it out. So it is an outdoor, I believe it's an outdoor area, but it's not the same as the dog exercise area. I think it's sort of a hybrid indoor outdoor, but I think the applicant the architect should be online as well, so they should be able to elaborate more on those differences.
Okay, and can connection to the sewer system be a requirement? I would be really concerned about this thing being on septic. And because they, among other things, they power wash all the kennels twice a day, and they do lawn and change out all the linens twice a day, which took care of any odor issues for me. In walking thing, but it does mean there's a lot of water being used, and that needs to be accommodated. So can that be required?
That's a potential condition. This project is subject to conditional use permit by the Planning Commission. So if there's a nexus to that issue, and it's certainly, I mean, that's certainly the applicant's desire. But I believe it could also be a requirement of the operation based on the logistics of everything happening here on the site. So I think we can continue to discuss that topic.
Okay. On the side of this facing the residences, I saw in your picture, Mariah, that there were 2 small windows. What rooms on the plan do those open onto? Are those rooms where dogs are kept?
So those would be, they would be more in the dog area. Again, this is the area facing the residences, if you can see my mouse here. And so these rooms, I don't believe, just based on what they are, would be used very often to actually have the animals in. This is the grooming area. This is the intake exam area. They do little photo shoots here, but otherwise it's food storage, laundry, dog food, electrical room. So these would be areas that are not used very often, but I suppose the dogs could be in, and it looks like the windows would be in the intake exam room and the grooming room.
But there's no dogs being housed in those areas. They're just very short-term use. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Good enough. Then what do we know about the impact on the traveling of sound of the facility being higher up than the residences that are nearest to it?
That's a really good question, because the way sound works, and that's why we build amphitheaters when we want to see a performance, sound typically travels up a slope. And so in this particular case, it's the reverse, it's the opposite. We've got a pretty significant slope at the back of this site in the big setback area. And this use is elevated above that and the houses are down below. So in this particular case, sound is not amplified into the residential neighborhood. It's actually going to be amplified out towards the freeway. And in fact, if there was a party going on at the house behind this location, that might be a problem for this location. But the latter isn't the case. If there's a party on this particular site, you're not going to hear as much of that noise down below. It's the opposite effect. So it doesn't have a sound amplification effect. That's a really good question about just the site in general. The way it's designed, it's probably quite convenient for that. In addition to the fact that I think they've gone pretty far out of their way to mitigate the sound by the arrangement of the building and the dog use areas that open up onto an inner courtyard surrounded by buildings. So that's another factor on sound.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then there was one of our public commenters in submitted comments previously who was asking about the potential for airborne disease. I know that you've got some rooms there that allow them to quarantine dogs. So if they get in a dog that might not be safe to be with the rest of the dog population there, that they can handle it separately.
Yeah, that's my understanding. I'm sure when you visited in San Luis, you saw their quarantine room as well, but that seemed to be something that was really emphasized, because if one of their dogs gets sick too, of course, they don't want the rest of their animals to get ill.
Okay, so that effort would then also protect the dogs in the neighborhood.
Yes, yeah, because they don't even want it to spread throughout their own facility. So I think it would protect the neighborhood dogs.
Okay. That's it for me for now.
Thank you, Susan. Emily?
Not at the moment. Thank you.
Dennis, it looks like you have another question.
Well, Susan has spoke about the sewer. Is there a sewer in Ramona Road?
So it's not in Ramona. It would actually be connecting, and Phil, you might know more of the lingo, but let me pull it up here. But it would be connecting to a manhole location that's in San Ramon Road. So this is actually the city's property here that I'm putting my mouse over. So they would get an easement to actually connect to the existing sewer line here. But in the case that the sewer is extended to Ramona, we are also requesting that they extend it all the way to Ramona.
Now,
And then,
the difficulty thing is there's no sewer in Ramona at this location. It's all the way out towards Del Rio. So if they come out towards Ramona, they're going to have to extend all the way up Del Rio. And then there may be some elevation issues. So their best bet for affordability is to go out the back through this existing property out to San Ramon, which would connect to the lift station that's currently in place for that particular neighborhood. So there's a couple different options there that they can go with. It's certainly all workable.
What would be the significance of extending it to Ramona Road? That it's been a long time since I've been that way, but I would say going towards Del Rio is going to be upgrade. And would there eventually be something extended to the south, or to the, I guess I would be southeast in this picture? And then that line that we're talking about extending to Ramona Road, that would be, a 10-inch, a 12-inch, a larger main to be able to carry more flows if
It
needed.
depends on the number of properties that want to participate and what the full plan is. There are other vacant properties here that are currently not served by sewer that may wish to connect in the near future. I know there's some properties that are in escrow nearby here. So there's a number of different solutions that are being evaluated right now. There's also a property right at the corner that's currently being considered for development as well. So there's all kinds of things happening in this neighborhood that are probably going to automatically trigger some sewer extensions here in the near future. So there's a number of options for these properties on Ramona, but right now the first one in is going to have to run that line all the way up Ramona to Del Rio. And that's a significant cost to do that all alone, unless there's others that are going to pitch in and contribute to that. So those are the issues we're facing today.
Okay. And just with respect to sound, I live about a mile away from the lake park, and when there are concerts at the lake park on the weekends, I can clearly hear those concerts. I live next to Santa Rosa School. And so, and I can hear the words. And so sound does travel.
Well, I can hear those concerts from my house, and I'm up on the other side of San Gabriel, up on the 3F Meadows. I can still hear the Lake Park concerts, and that's the amphitheater effect.
Yeah. But it just, it's not, I would say living next to, I mean, we all have experiences in our neighborhoods where a dog is barking at nighttime, a single dog barking at nighttime, and sometimes that keeps us awake when we're hearing it. So whether I don't believe that it's going to be a significant issue here, but it would be a concern if it's not controlled. And you had mentioned about the orientation of the building and the player or the exercise area and the greet area, how it opens up to perpendicular to the homes is considerate.
Yeah, the most important thing here is it's a controlled environment where the dogs are indoors for the most part. They have some outdoor playtime, but the dogs are indoors at night. And it's kind of like your neighbor. If one of my neighbors leaves their dog out at night and they happen to go out to dinner, you're probably going to hear that dog, and it's going to echo for a mile through this neighborhood. And probably be the same here, but this is a controlled situation where the animals are indoors, and it's a very controlled climate in a very controlled situation. Very different than a dog breeding operation or a kennel or someone's personal dogs. It's very, very controlled. And I think the applicants will talk to you about that. And I was very concerned about this noise situation myself, but I did do a tour of the facility, and I was very surprised and impressed about how differently it's handled. And that's what caused us to evaluate this on a different scale than a kennel, somewhere between a kennel and an animal hospital, but much closer to an animal hospital, the way it handles and mitigates sound. It's a very different land use, really.
Thank you.
I guess my only question would be is how much community outreach was done with the neighbors as we discussed the noise conversations, and What additional feedback did the applicant do to engage their local community neighbors?
We should ask the Woods folks about that. They did do a couple of outreach opportunities. They did mailers to all of the neighbors there. And they actually did a live outreach event, which I attended. Unfortunately, that live outreach event was really poor attended. It was right when COVID began. And I think a lot of folks were insecure about going out anywhere. So they've been challenged by that, but I think that we should ask their team to see what they've heard and what kind of outreach they've really done on that end of it.
Okay, I guess at this point, we'll go ahead and open it up to the applicant and we'll do public comment.
I do have one question, actually.
Go ahead, Emily.
And I apologize, Maria, if I missed it, but I was wondering, what is the exterior finish on the existing spay and neuter facility to remain? And is the new facility being built to match that, or will that be brought into like a cohesive design strategy for the new building? Like, will that be upgraded to match, or is this being designed to match it?
Yeah, and now that I'm pulling this up, I'm sorry, the top picture here is not the spay and neuter facility, but you can see it in the background of this picture. So it is a similar, it's a similar color that they're proposing, and it's really important. Woods wants to make it obviously as nice as possible. So I was told that even if they are off a little bit, they either want to make sure they're complemented or the color that's really important to them. And I believe it does, it's kind of looks more like a modular sort of unit. So it does have that horizontal siding. So it will be consistent with that. I'm sorry, not horizontal, vertical siding, but will be.
It looks like a T111 or something, you know, standard to a modular. And I just was hoping to find out what was, you know, how they were going to coordinate with that to improve its appearance and or make it blend better with the metal siding.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I have one more question also, please. Was there any discussion as to why the site plan wasn't rotated 180 degrees by putting the parking in between the new facility and the homes versus the other way around?
No, I don't know. The Woods parking lot is currently like this. And then the existing building is here. So we can ask the applicant. Sometimes cars with the lights and stuff, maybe that is more of a disturbance than just having a blank wall back here. But the applicant can probably weigh in on that.
And one more question for me. If the applicant is planning this for a specific number of dogs, and my recollection is that it's pretty small, maybe a dozen dogs. I was seeing in those drawings, it looked like a lot more kennel spaces than that. And so I wondered, as the process goes along, at what point is there a limit to the number of dogs that can be accommodated without having to go back for additional, for changes to the CUP? Mm-hmm. Or is that something that can be written in as a condition of the CUP at the Planning Commission level and taken care of?
Yeah, that's something that can definitely be conditioned. Like I said, I'm not exactly sure how many they're planning on having at one time, but certainly that can be set by the Planning Commission. And then if they ever wanted to exceed it, they could come back for an amendment.
Okay.
All right, I think we have all the questions. Let's go ahead and bring the applicant on and see if they can address some of our questions.
And Luke, that would be Neil Trent or Woods Humane Society.
Greetings, folks. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Sorry about that. I've been listening and taking notes on your very good questions, and I'm actually going to pass the proverbial buck here, because I'm delighted to be able to tell you that our chief architect, Heather Lewis, is on this call. And as we went through those questions, I could see that there were most of them were questions that she could answer quite quickly, I think, and satisfy the inquiry. So if I could just ask Heather to join us and answer some of those questions, and if there's anything that's missed or relates specifically to animal issue, I'll jump in at the end, if that's okay with Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Neil. This will be a test to make sure that I took the same good notes that you took. So thank you very much. And you can just let me know if I've missed anything. So let's address first the design of the building as it relates to ventilation. You know, do the dogs have outside ventilation so that we can kind of understand if you would hear them. This building would be designed differently from the one at San Luis Obispo in that the building is entirely enclosed. So the dog doesn't have the outside air blowing through the kennel at the dog's level. So this is more like a hospital building. So the way that you would build a hospital building where there's a patient inside that building, this is designed with the same kind of approach. So obviously it is ideal for a dog to have more just fresh outside air coming right in at their nose level, but we are being sensitive to the noise that would create for the neighborhood, and therefore have an entirely all indoor facility, which means there's a solid wall. So there's no screen or, you know, open area there. So the way that we did then deal with animal health in that setup is we would need to move air forcefully through the building, again, just like a hospital. And what we do is positively pressurize the public spaces and then negatively pressurize the animal spaces. The air is exhausted out. Because our company specializes in animal care facilities, it's very normal for us to design an animal care facility just like this one. So it's not at all unusual. We have 12 to 15 air changes per hour going through those kennel buildings. So that then is a lot of airflow. Again, that's like human health. And so that will protect the health and well-being of the dogs that are in this facility. And then by extension, just as staff mentioned, would also protect the health and well-being of neighborhood animals. Most of the infectious disease in an animal shelter is actually all about environmental sanitation. It isn't about airflow. So we would also have a very sanitary environment. So that hopefully addresses both the design of the wall and the design of the ventilation in kind of the same umbrella. Going now to the number of kennels, one of the things that may not be clear to everyone unless you're in animal sheltering is that we require each dog to have 2 compartments for their kennel. So that means they have, we call that a double compartment enclosure. The reason that we require that is it reduces the animal's stress to have choice about where they go. So just like we need choice, they need choice too. And by providing those 2 compartments, they have choice. So what looks like a lot of runs is actually not so many. So we have 16 standard runs that are in the building in the adoption area. So those that say adoption dogs, that's a total of 16. And then we have these other rooms. So we have isolation, we have quarantine, and we have flex. We actually learn from I'm going to be honest, our firm probably over designs things because we do this for a living. And so it's rare for us to have very many animals in isolation. The way that you size an animal facility is just the way you size a human hospital. And we know we have been really stressed about hospital capacity because it's unacceptable for human hospitals to operate at peak capacity as they have been. Animal care facilities are exactly the same. So it's very unusual to have even more than one dog in isolation or, the quarantine filled. It's just there if you need it, if there were an unusual event. The flex dogs would also have, there would also be dogs in those at times. So the total number of kennels in the building is 28 to kind of summarize.
Yeah.
And yeah. So hopefully that helps address, the number of kennels. Then in regard to the meet and greet yards, so we haven't designed all the details of these yards, but the meet and greet yard is a yard where a person in the public may meet a new friend to take home with them. And so it's expected that that yard would have a more kind of turf, like a faux turf or something like that in there that's very cleanable because it's a heavily used yard. And it's also surrounded kind of by a solid wall because that's going to be one of the most active yards. So we've gone to great lengths to try to prevent exuberance from, escaping from this facility to surrounding facilities. The Woods Humane Society would be supervising all the dogs that are in outside areas. There's never unattended dogs. This is not a kennel. It's not a boarding facility. They're always with staff. Answering the question about why we located the building where we did, we actually tried a variety of situations with locating the building, and we did try putting it in front because that was actually something that was suggested by the last DRC. There were a couple of reasons why this did not work. One is it actually provided worse screening for the dog yards. By jamming all the square footage in the front, it means that the play yards need to go in the back. And that was actually a worse condition for the neighbors than what we ended up with. The second reason is there's actually not enough square footage in front to meet the programmatic needs for the Woods Humane Society, which would have meant wrapping the existing building to remain, which is a pretty weird kind of setup when there's a modular building in the center. So we tried every kind of configuration possible and then decided that this was the best one for both meeting the public entry needs to this site, keeping most of the activity actually in the front where Ramona is. So that's where the public visits. That's where one of the dog yards is. And then that allowed us to then screen the secondary dog yard from the neighbor. So overall, this was the best configuration for protecting the neighborhood and being respectful. As to answering the question about where the windows are, we would like to ask permission not to prohibit, sorry, I should turn my email off, not to prohibit any windows into the dog areas because dogs need natural light. We would be very happy to ensure that those windows are sound control windows, which we have done before. We did at the Santa Cruz SPCA, by the way. And those, however, those program functions that are facing towards the neighborhood are not dog housing. So just to agree there with the staff and commission members who were discussing that, those are not dog housing areas whatsoever. So there shouldn't be noise coming from those areas. And all these walls surrounding the building would achieve a high sound transmission class, which means that there won't be sound transmitting through the wall that's of any significance. So I hope that answers most of the things that you all had answered, and then Neil can let me know which ones I missed. Oh, so the siding of the building, I should address that. So the existing building to remain, the Spay Neuter Clinic, is a very important building because it serves the public and also serves the Humane Society. And without Spay Neuter, we would have many more homeless animals. So it's one of those proactive programs that's really important. That building, however, is a modular structure, and therefore it is that T111 siding. We would not be able to upgrade that because those buildings are so sensitive because they're not super robust buildings, so that we would be happy to, recolor it if the review committee would like us to. So what we're trying to do with the existing building is use a much more durable material, which the pre-finished metal panel would be, but not to have it be in disharmony with things that may remain for some time.
And then I've got one other question for you, and it looks like, go ahead, Dennis, you got a question?
Yeah, please. I'm glad to see, Heather, that your offices have a lot of experience in the care of animals, and thank you for making your presentation. Just a question though, I don't know if you can answer. With the buildings that you have designed in other areas, for instance, you referenced Santa Cruz, are you aware of there being a lot of complaints about noise from those facilities?
There are often complaints about noise when dogs are in indoor, outdoor type enclosures, just because people are very sensitive to noise from dogs, and that's reasonable. However, there are virtually no complaints from people who design these all indoor facilities, from neighbors where we have all indoor facilities. And so when we believe there's going to be sensitivity in regard to the noise, we would go to this design. It's been very effective.
Okay, yeah, it's a kind of an unusual thing where a natural sound of a dog barking is bothersome, but the motorcycle that doesn't have glass backs on it driving up and down the street very loud is normal, and we accept that. I appreciate the fact that this is being an enclosed building. Thank you.
And if I could put a question for Neil. I noticed in my tour of the San Luis Obispo facility a remarkable dearth of noise. It was really quiet, and also attention to operating practices that reduced the potential for the triggers for dogs to bark, such as the dogs being kenneled in ways that they don't have sight lines to each other. And then when they are outside, that the staff, as I understand it, at that facility doesn't have multiple dogs out in the same area at the same time. So the dogs have that individual outdoor time. Could you elaborate on what those standards of practice are that help manage noise when the dogs are getting their outdoor time?
Susan, yes, of course. Can everybody still hear me?
Yes.
I didn't lose my hand. Okay, good. It's very important to us in how Woods operates, is to find the very best home we can, the right fit for each individual animal. And to do that, we have to spend an awful lot of time evaluating the individual animal. So we actually have a behavior and training team, and we also have a lot of staff, trained staff and volunteers that actually get involved in the interaction with the animals. So at any one time, the animal has almost a buddy, a human buddy, right the way through its time at the shelter. So the more time we spend with the animal, the more time we interact, the more time we find out whether it's got any social issues that we need to do some intervention on, the better chance we have of ending up with a really good home. And that's our goal. So we do spend a lot of time interacting with the animal, and that is a big issue for us when they're actually being exercised, when they are actually getting outside of the kennel in their individual exercise time, that we spend a lot of time evaluating them, spending time socializing with them. So there's no occasion, I suppose, to be honest with you, 50 years ago, the concept of anywhere that looked after animals was probably 150 dogs in chain link, sort of concrete facility, barking 24/7. That's not where we are now. And so we spend a great deal of time making sure that the stress levels on an animal are reduced. We don't want animals to be barking a lot and excitedly when somebody comes in to view them. We want an animal to be in a really good, relaxed frame of mind. And that's what we work on all the time. Did that help?
Yes, and am I correct in understanding that individual dogs, that you don't let multiple dogs out into the outdoors area at the same time, that they get their individual time?
That's right. We do know there's times when we do have animals have a little fun time together, because some of these dogs buddy up very quickly. There are some animals, we have 2 in our front lobby at the moment that were surrendered to us today, and they're inseparable. And they're senior dogs. I don't know the full history, and I was sad to see them both in together. I mean, they're seniors. They're sort of 9, 10 plus, but you can't put a sheaf of paper between the 2 of them. They're absolutely bonded, and so those animals will certainly exercise together. But there are some animals that feel more comfortable if we're trying to pull an animal out that's been depressed in any way. I mean, we do take animals from shelters that are very challenged. And by the time some of these animals come to us, they're not in the best of mental health, mental state. So we do see animals sort of depressed. And so having perhaps a buddy with them at some times helps pull that personality out, gives them some security. But we certainly don't throw 20 animals into a kennel and let them get on with it. That's absolutely, that defeats most of our objectives.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Neil. I have a question for you. On your community outreach, how productive was that, or were you able to really talk with the neighborhood?
Thank you, Heather. Yes, we did a number of things. We sent out flyers, of course, to the neighbouring properties. We identified about 150 local property owners and residents. We sent out flyers to them all. I had my cell phone number put on the flyers so I could answer any questions anybody had about the issues. We sent a second mailing out to the same group. That was about 275 pieces that was mailed out. Then we had our Woods team canvass the Apple community, asking, there's about 65 residences down immediately behind us, putting postcards in mailboxes and also talking to folks about the fact that we wanted to have a public meeting to share our vision with the local people in the Apple community. And then we hosted this community meeting on March the 14th at the San Benito Elementary School. And as Phil has mentioned, it didn't go well. It was right on the start, the cusp of the COVID. And so it wasn't attended. A lot of folk just didn't want to venture out. We do plan, now we've seen certainly some response from the Apple community. We went through the first design review committee and there was no comment from the public. So we basically, rather naively, and I am British after all, so that goes with the territory, naively thought everything was fine. It was hunky-dory, nobody wanted to object. But now, of course, there are some concerns, and absolutely understandably, concerns from some of the local residences. So we will be reaching out to that community. I'm very happy to invite any of the folk, the community there, to come down to our facility down in Slough and walk through and actually see how we look after the animals. I would like to say to Dennis, I admire the fact that you were a volunteer at the Animal Services Department, Dennis, but you and I both know that that facility was probably built in 1890, and which is exactly why, of course, there's a huge new facility being built on the other side of us now at a multi-million dollar event, construction that's going to be, I think, ready in the spring of next year. But because practices of housing and caring for animals have changed over the last 2 to 3 decades. And so it is absolutely understandable that if people's perception goes to the original type of shelter, they are noisy. But if you came to Slough and walked around our campus, and I invite anybody from the Apple community that has issues, to reach out to me, and I'd be very happy to give them a guided tour. And I think they'd be really reassured that actually the actual way we handle and look after our animals here.
Thank you, Neil. Looks like we have a question from Emily, and then we need to go to public comment.
I do have two follow-up questions, actually. One, how is animal waste handled and where are the dumpsters to be located? The printout I have has a 19. I think I can see it, but I don't see the representation of the dumpsters themselves. And then secondly, considering all of the air changes per hour that were mentioned, it seems like the mechanical equipment's going to be pretty sizable, and I'm wondering where that's going to be located. I'm guessing on the roof, but I wanted confirmation.
It's a parapet.
So everyone still hear me? This is Heather. All right, great. They call me the poop lady. So I've designed so many animal care facilities and have been doing this for 2 decades. And so waste is a big deal, of course, and something we need to take care of. So a couple of facts to orient us. Again, there aren't a huge number of dogs in this building, and cats have litter, so they're not included in the waste quotient. So we're just thinking about dogs. And the best practice now is to, I'm sorry to be descriptive, but to pick up the solids and dispose of those before you hose down. And the reason for doing that is you don't want to splatter them around. Again, sorry to be graphic, but we have to remove the solids in order to do a good job with disinfection. And by doing that, then there's very little that actually goes into the public sewer system. We would prefer sewer over septic because there is the matter of we use water, and that's a fact. So dealing with it in a septic system is not delightful. However, we do get rid of a lot of solids in the meantime to help the municipal waste system. The other thing I can say is that the disinfectants now used in animal care are the world's best disinfectants. They're the disinfectants of choice in human healthcare as well. And they are hydrogen peroxide based cleaners that degrade into oxygen and water. So that's lovely for the environment and still does a great job killing any pathogens. So we feel like we're going to have a very healthy facility. In fact, not to go into the weeds, but part of the reason why we like sewer over septic is the disinfectants are so great that when we have a septic system, we have trouble maintaining that bacteria that we need in the septic system. So the wash down should be healthy for all of us. In regard to the mechanical systems, you're correct. They can be sizable. However, there's very little animal dog housing in this building. We've created a little bucket for the mechanical systems on the roof, for lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. And we would put mechanical units in there conceptually and feed the 2 wings from that center area. And then that has raised size on it. Yes, we've created some architectural complexities in terms of draining the roof, but we don't want you to see that mechanical equipment. So that's why we would create some sort of a screening for it architecturally.
And I'm assuming the parapet walls there to help with the visual screening would also help with any, mitigate any noise coming from the large equipment.
Correct. Yeah. And in the case of this building, we certainly wouldn't just have 1 unit. We would have maybe some smaller units that are, distributed, but the main air handling equipment would occur here. And there may be quite a bit of fan energy, but we use internally isolated motors to cut down on fan noise. And do the best we can by screening with parapet walls.
And I might have missed it. Did you state where the dumpsters for the solid waste would reside?
We were to look at the site plan, it would be the area that is maybe probably better to pull it up before I architecture my way through it. It's that area that is in the northwest corner there where we have the turnaround.
Okay, that's what I was guessing, but I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and open it up to public comment. Anybody wanting to speak on this project, please raise your hand. All right, looks like does Heather Lewis, are you meaning to speak?
No, that was just me signaling you when that I was going to answer the solid waste question.
Oh, okay, thank you. And then we've got Jamie Salvera. Hi, Jamie. We'll need to unmute. There you go.
All right, everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So I am a resident of Apple Colony. I have been since 2008. And truthfully, this project terrifies me, along with a number of our neighbors. Starting with the notifications that went out. A lot of us were home during COVID, and I cannot say that any one of us have been approached by Woods to further explain the project and talk with us. I specifically am on Conejo Road, so I am closer to the Ramona Road project, the Woods Society. And again, I have not been approached by anybody or any extra reach outs to have a conversation around it. Another concern of ours is the sewer connection. We pay over $400 a year in sewer assessments for Apple Colony. And if this is to tie in, then Woods would be using our lift station sewer area that we are assessed on yearly and have been since the project was, Apple Colony was developed, which I don't think would be right with all of us residents taking on that expense. And then noise pollution. We live in a quiet neighborhood. We have CCNRs that only allow 3 dogs per residence. And then the rest of Conejo is residential for City of Atascadero with their ordinances in place. And in regards to the amphitheater sound type travel, half of Apple Colony is level with the site. We don't all sit below the Woods Society project or property. A lot of us are level, and so noise will travel straight across. If a dog is barking, I can hear across from Conejo all the way to Via Colonia, no problem. We do have 6-foot fences in our development. We have multiple houses in our development, and that does not dampen the noise of dog travel, barking travel in the neighborhood. And if it is allowed, they mentioned the max capacity of 28 dogs, which probably wouldn't be that many at any given time. But even if there was half of that, that's a lot more barking to be in the neighborhood to then excite other dogs, in the neighborhood that aren't used to those constant dog barking. So it's just going to tailor that noise around the entire Apple Colony versus what it currently is in existence. So the noise is absolute concern for a lot of us. And as you mentioned, there's more voices being brought up now because we've been made more aware of the project and the agenda. Something I did want to point out is some of the information out there is not, I feel like, as accurate and very vague for the neighborhood to understand. In the applicant statement for the agenda, it says the planned unit facility will be approximately 13,000 square feet on a single level and will provide all indoor accommodations predominantly for cats and kittens with some spaces for dog adoptions. So again, I feel like the information that's being shared isn't very direct to the neighborhood, very misleading. And I think this is now why we're more stepping up, because we're all fearful of our quiet community kind of turning upside down. So I just wanted to kind of bring some of my thoughts in of what I'm thinking through and other neighbors that I've spoken to.
May I ask a question, please?
Dennis, can we do public comment finish public comments first before we ask any more questions?
I want to ask a question of Jamie when that happens.
Okay, go ahead.
Was there anything, now that you heard the architect speak and you heard information presented on behalf of Woods, was there anything that you heard from the architect about the design of the structure that maybe alleviated some of your concerns?
No, because the orientation that opens out actually opens slightly towards via Colonia. So that side of the neighborhood is not being blocked by the single story. And as I mentioned, we can still hear dogs in our neighborhood with single story homes that are not blocking the sound. And then we also have 6-foot fences in our neighborhood. And again, it doesn't block the sound of the dogs in the neighborhood. So the plan that's presented and the conversation that was brought up with the architect, my concerns still stand.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Next one I have is Aero Sustainable Material Technology is what's coming up. You're muted.
Yeah, sorry, that's me. That's my business account. The resident that lives right behind the proposed expansion. And I did want to add some additional context about the storm drain. As it currently stands, it backs up all the time, just with the current amount of rainfall that we get. And as I look out my window right now, there's pretty much a garden growing in the culvert. So I fear that any additional wastewater that comes down is going to create additional problems for all of us here in the neighborhood. And I thank Jamie for bringing up her comments about the drainage as we pay for it right now, given our current rules and regulations. The other thing I wanted to add some context on are just, again, to piggyback off Jamie's comments, being the resident right behind this facility, I also received no mailings, nor did I get any visits from anybody in an outreach program. So I'm not sure where that came from, but did not get anything here. And then the last thing is, I guess I had a question. What is the logic behind the expansion and kind of tiptoeing and dancing around keeping us residents happy rather than simply building a different facility elsewhere? And that's all I have.
Thank you. Can we get your name for the record?
Stephen Shrew.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
We've got Heather Sutherland. You're muted. Are you still wanting to speak, Heather Sutherland?
I'm trying. Oh, can you hear me?
Good job.
Yeah. All right. I am Heather Sunderland. My husband and myself live on 6020 Conejo Road. So we share a property line with the 2400 Ramona lot. So we can see woods from a lot of our property. We love woods. We actually got the best dog in the world from woods. So I have a heavy heart bringing up some concerns, but I am in the final stages, excuse me, of a very delayed 2-year project to open a preschool out of our home. Once fully licensed, will serve 12 to 14 children daily from infant to 6 years old. Highly value child-led education through play and nature. We also have lots of animals, farm animals that the children get to be with. So a lot of our day is spent outside. The next story is something I don't really share with a lot of people, but 3 years ago, I watched my husband, Jeff, as he was mauled by 5 of our neighbors' large dogs on the property we lived on. He fought for his life against these dogs, and he survived because of his Carhartt pants. So it was a horrible thing to watch. We ended up having to move off of our property because nothing was done about the animals except for a small quarantine. The constant dog barking was unnerving. We ended up moving to Jeff's parents' property because we felt so unsafe. I developed pretty severe PTSD and subsequently was put on disability from my teaching job of 8 years because my boss and my neighbor's dog barking was giving me such severe flashbacks. I've done a lot of work since that time, but to be honest, I'm concerned, and I am a little less concerned after hearing from the architect and the design committee, but I am concerned about my ability to provide care if during daytime hours I am surrounded by dog barking. I wouldn't have chosen this location to open a preschool if I knew there was a possibility of a dog shelter. There's also an extreme need for childcare in San Luis Obispo County that's just been exacerbated by the pandemic. Atascadero is #1 priority, or is one of the #1 priorities by San Luis Obispo Childcare Planning Council because of our extreme need. So I guess I can kind of get rid of some of my questions here because they've been answered, but I am concerned about the green fence along the 2400 lot, 2400 Ramona lot. I'm wondering what kind of fencing that was. I wasn't clear on that. And yeah, I just kind of wanted my voice to be heard because this could really affect my business and our community and frankly, my mental health. And so yeah, I just kind of wanted to say something. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Heather. Do we have anybody else that's wishing to speak?
The one person calling, if you would like to comment, can hit *9 on your phone and it will raise your hand so we'll know you want to make a comment.
I'm trying to keep my peanut gallery quiet back here. Okay, we'll give it another minute. If somebody is wanting to comment, please raise your hand, little paddle down on the bottom. If you're on our webinar or if you are calling it *9. Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comment and we'll bring it back to committee for discussion. Who wants to go first? Susan.
I do have a couple of additional questions that came up in listening to the public comment. One of them is, what's the impact of this station if they do the sewer going in the direction of the Apple Valley connection on Ramona, or not on Ramona, but into Apple Valley? What's the impact on the capacity of the lift station, and what kind of cost sharing will happen for Woods with relative to the, in fairness with the residents of that area?
Yeah, unfortunately, Nick DeBar has been on this meeting the whole time and he just had to step out of this meeting into another meeting.
We don't have that level of technical detail on that end, but I'm certain they would play a role and play a part in that agreement and in that lift station support. But Nick would be the best to answer that. We'll have to see if we can get him through email or text and see if he can help us with that question.
Okay. And then I know at the noise, obviously, I hear that the architects real serious and the organization serious attention to maintaining the peace of the neighborhood with noise management. And obviously that's really important. I know we've had questions come up through council where where something that might generate noise that would be problematic to a neighborhood I recall that's the drive-through pharmacy window at Walgreens, which is close to some residences, and a model from that was used when a resident on the backside of Humane Coffee's space was concerned about the noise traveling from their speaker. There was a mechanism to like check it after a year and see how things were going. I'm wondering if there are any, so if there's any applicable option like that for this property, and if it were, if it's built and there's a lot more barking and noise and it's more intrusive into the neighborhood, in particular during the daytime, then one would expect, if there are any options, you know, what could you do? Is there anything that can be done at that point if this thing is, you know, not out of control, or if Woods sold the facility to someone who was less scrupulous in their management of the animals?
Well, a CUP does run with the land, so whatever conditions or people be placed on this particular project and whatever design is approved here will run with this particular site indefinitely. If another user came in and operated it differently, they would have to either come in to ask to alter this CUP, or things would have to change along those ends. So they can't just automatically come in and change this operation. This CUP really outlines the details, conditions, and this project and this design, everything.
So can you do a noise study as a contingency prior
Yes.
to?
Yeah, there's a clear nexus to do a condition for that with the conditional use permit. That could be the case. And certainly you can do a noise study on the site before it's built. You can do studies afterwards and have mitigation that adds or changes things if there's a problem as well.
Okay, that's the kind of thing I was looking for. A way to, you know, factually check it later. And I'm just wondering if there is actual mitigation that can be done. That's.
Yeah, it seems that Woods is putting a lot of time and effort to try to deal with the issue. I wonder how much also mitigation there could be without putting a 20-foot wall on the back line. And even then, would that stop noise? It seems that, again, they're putting a lot of time and money and effort into this to try to make it work, and to have them potentially lose some of their use in the future because of some noise that might attenuate off-site might bother, as we heard from public comments, some neighbors are more sensitive than others. How do you determine what is too much in the future?
Yeah. It's really hard to understand these facilities until you visit. I was really surprised when I saw and heard or didn't hear the facility. It's very different than one would imagine.
That was my experience also. It was remarkably quiet and remarkably not smelly, both of which I was attentive to. And I suppose if you ran into unusual issues that work could be done with the fencing that is on the side of both directly to the neighborhood, but also on the side that would be facing towards whatever's the parking lot that's the upper part of this, what the picture on the screen right now. I don't know how far that solid fencing goes back for a ways. But potentially you could do something, a sound wall or something that would be even more substantial if if everything that if all of the design and all of the evidence that we see at the San Luis facility doesn't plan out into something that's, I mean, this should have a level of barking that doesn't exceed a neighbor who has 3 dogs, because that's what the homeowners association allows in Apple Valley. So it depends on the dog. There I have neighbors that have 3 dogs that are very quiet, and neighbors or multiple dogs that are quiet, and dogs that are not. So that's that does happen.
I think our biggest comments are being noise. I think as we're looking at some of this, what kind of sound barriers can be in place? What kind of options do we have as we're trying to discuss its compatibility, and we're going through Mariah's list? Let's start with Mariah's list, and then we can get our feedback, and then we can go from there. One for your list here, Mariah.
And Madam Chair, I see that there is at least one person who's raised a hand, a couple of hands raised in the attendee list that are after you closed public comment.
Yes, I did.
I did. So I didn't know if you.
I did see it. Actually, I hear it too. One of the challenges that we have is opening and closing public comment. I think in the last meeting we did that too. So I want to go through and address Mariah's stuff, and then we'll look to make sure that it looks like the few people who are in public comment haven't spoken before. So before we get into DRC items of discussion with Mariah, I guess I can reopen public comment for those that didn't get a chance to speak, since we want to give everybody the greatest opportunity to do so. But if you've already spoken at public comment, we ask that you hold those comments for now, and we'll reopen public comment and let Wendy Behrman speak. There you go.
So I wanted to clarify some comments, questions that I just heard. I am with Animal Arts, and one aspect of the design that was critical, in addition to the noise, was the mature trees on site. So if you were to look at the courtyard, the mature trees are being preserved. Those actually work in concert for mitigating sound, because of the way sound works and bouncing off objects. All of those tree leaves and whatnot in that area do assist. And that is also why you've got evergreen screening along the fence line. So there's like a redundancy built into your request, which is great. The other thing I wanted to comment on is I heard a comment from the public on the storm drainage, and I think there might have been a confusion, not sure, but the storm drainage system is a completely different system than the sanitary sewer system, and the sanitary system is part of the City of Atascadero's public works, and so Woods Humane would be working with Atascadero Public Works on that aspect of the design. We do not, the Woods Humane would not be involved in any stormwater work that affects the adjacent Apple Valley. Stormwater is separate than sanitary sewer. That was it.
Thank you. Next speaker, Daryl. Daryl.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Sorry for the late hand raise. I didn't realize I had to push a button on the screen that I couldn't see till I touched the screen.
It's all right.
Did it old school, the regular hand raise, and that didn't quite get it done. Number one, I live on Conejo in the Apple Valley subdivision, and I agree with everything that and all the comments and concerns that Jamie brought up. So I'm not going to repeat a bunch of that, but I want to just put my stamp along the side of her comments on every one of them. I do think that we, as residents, came into this very late, and I just appreciate your committee hearing our concerns at this point, and hopefully it's not too late for those concerns to be addressed. And reading through the material and looking at the plan, I just kind of, it's eye-opening as a resident. I mean, who wants to have that at their back fence? I just don't think anybody on the committee would, and I don't think anybody really would ever plan that they'd have something like that right behind their house or even across the way in my case. And then I've heard some different information about how many dogs can be on site at any one time. But when I look at the plan, I see 50 dog pens inside the facility and 2 dog exercise areas. So I heard 28 dogs is supposed to be the max. And I guess my thing is, why do you have twice as many pens as you're going to have dogs? The other thing is, with that many pens and that size facility and all of the facilities that go into servicing those animals, my big concern is that this is just a stepping stone where we will have some sheltering of dogs. And my understanding is, and maybe you can clarify this for me, that there is to be no dogs ever kept overnight there. And that being the case, if there's 28 dogs that come in there during the day, where do those dogs come from and where do they go at the end of that day? I just don't understand the logistics there, so I need that explained to me. So with all the noise screening talk that I've heard today and the comments, I read the emails that were sent to you before the meeting, and all the conversation today, 90% of it has been about noise. And I know that noise is going to be an ongoing issue, and all of your comments that you've made today about noise, the committee members about noise, you're very concerned about that, and I appreciate that. And you've even gone down to the San Luis Obispo facility to check that out, and I appreciate that. But being a resident that's going to be here real close to this facility, I'm way concerned about noise. And you know, just one dog barking consistently is a nuisance to anybody. You don't want to hear it. So I just don't feel that this facility that is being proposed is compatible with the location that it's trying to be put in. The facility that's there now is very neighborhood friendly, and I like woods, but having dogs there to the extent that we're going to be putting dogs there, I don't think is compatible with where it's trying to be put. So I just really appreciate your time, and thank you for hearing my comments.
Thank you, Daryl. Okay, I think don't see any more with a raised hand. I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. We're going to bring it back. Mariah, let's go through your discussion items.
One item I will bring up, we did get an answer from Nick DeBar on the wastewater issue, the question that we had from the public. I'd like to respond to that one now, if I may. And I think the question was regarding the fees that are being paid right now by residents in that neighborhood. And Nick clarified that the assessment district they have over there is really for the street and street lighting and landscape maintenance, not for the sewer, not for the wastewater. The sewer service charge is actually collected by levying on the property tax rolls, and that's for everyone throughout the entire city. There's no special assessment for that particular Apple Valley sewer. They are in a benefit assessment district where they pay extra on property taxes for street and common landscape maintenance, and it doesn't cover the sewer maintenance over there. So just wanted to clarify that those extra fees they pay are a different fee set.
Thank you for that clarification, Phil. Mariah, the first thing you had on your list was site design. And does that speak to compatibility, or what are you looking for on our feedback on site design?
Yeah, just the overall woods, because of some of the comments made previously from the design review committee, in addition to actual architecture, before it was a really rough sketch, just shaping it in a way to where it's compatible with the neighborhood. So based on the comments we've received today and the design review committee's input on if they feel that's appropriate, or if they would want to see something different.
I'll look to my committee members. Looks like we got you, Emily.
I do recall the previous conversation regarding site design when it was brought before DRC previously, and I appreciated the architect's explanation of the exercises that they went through to determine per their experience that this was the best layout. I look to them to provide that input because they do have that experience, and I'm comfortable with the site layout as proposed, I think, from a DRC perspective, as far as the design itself goes.
Okay. Okay, Jeff.
I think I agree with Emily. As far as the site design goes, I don't have any issues at all with what they've proposed.
Okay, Dennis.
I'm wondering if I missed something. The conditional use permit is for what reason?
This land use is a conditionally allowed use. We've determined it's basically like an animal hospital, which requires a CUP. So the land use itself requires a CUP. So the charge of the DRC today is solely design. And then the planning commission will be charged with the actual land use and findings and conditions. And again, I'll just remind all the neighbors they can weigh in if we get to that hearing, and I'll weigh in on that as well as design.
But it is, in terms of compatibility with the neighboring parcels, it is an allowed use in this area, or on any of these lots in this area.
Is not
on that side of the fence.
It's a conditional use. So it's not an allowed use, it's a conditional use. And so the planning commission is going to be charged with the land use, the neighborhood compatibility, noise, all of those things.
I guess my question, I'm not framing it correctly. When I look at the land use category, animal hospital is something that is allowed through a conditional use permit. It's not a use that's being let's say it's not a listed use. Does that make sense? I'm trying to frame it correctly. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah. Can you remind us, Mariah, what our determination was on that? I think you had a slide.
Oh,
on our discussion.
yeah, so it's been determined to be an animal hospital. Dennis, I think what you might be getting maybe is, so it is a conditionally allowed use. And so basically the whole purpose of a conditional use permit is there's areas where this might be appropriate and areas where it might not. And there's ways, if there's ways to make it better in a neighborhood, that's what the conditions are for. So, so that's why in the public zone, it is conditional, because in some public areas, it might not be appropriate, or in some it might. So that's.
Are there other public zoned lands in this area, or is this isolated area?
Well, there's several lots along the frontage road there that are zoned public. There's the church there. There's the used car lot area there. And then there's a property close to Del Rio that's also in public, and there's a vacant lot there. I will say something, it's also as an aside, when we evaluate our general plan, we're going to be looking at all of our public zones, because really public zoning is designed for public facilities, whether that's a police station, a fire station, a school, a church, public park. All of those kinds of things are the allowed uses and expected uses in the general plan. It's very unusual, just like when we dealt with a mini storage property, to have privately owned properties in public zoning. That's why when we evaluate our general plan here soon, any of these privately owned public zoned spaces will probably be rezoned to another type of commercial land use that can more readily fit the aspects of the neighborhood. And especially when you've got a freeway frontage commercial property, it probably has a higher and better use. But typically these properties are, like I said, designed for school, fire station, police station. But in a lot of scenarios, those kinds of land uses may not be the best land use adjacent to a quiet residential neighborhood.
So if it was, example, if it is a commercial use of some type, if it gets changed, is an animal hospital allowed conditionally in that land use?
Yes, it's allowed in the commercial retail zones, the service commercial zone, even the CPK zone. For example, across the freeway in our CPK zone is the other animal hospital, the El Camino Vet Hospital. They just went through a recent expansion and they received a conditional use permit for their expansion. And they house animals there as well. They also obviously repair animals.
Well, I think in terms of the site plan, that the fact that the architect firm specializes in this area, and they have a lot of experience. I think that they had adequate, for me, more than adequate responses to all the questions that were asked. Pretty remarkable.
Thank you. Susan?
Yeah, I think obviously managing noise is the key thing for this facility to work well with a neighborhood. And I really appreciate the clear attention to that. I'm comfortable with the overall design of this. I do think that it will be worth in that having a backstop created in the conditional use permit to make sure that if it's substantially noisier than a polite neighbor with 3 dogs would be, then then there should be an opportunity for neighbors to request some mitigation on it over time. As I'm thinking about this, the aspect that I gave less attention to at first, but that I now thinking of, given the neighbors' comments, is the outdoor yard that is directly exercise yard that's directly next to Ramona Road. It's the farthest from the residences, and therefore it sounds got further to travel, but people did make the point that dog barking does travel, and it has the least sound protections relative to the neighborhood. So that sound wall in a direction or something might be an option there. I'm comfortable with the design for now if you've got some kind of backstop that that would allow, based on sound study or concerns, to have further mitigation if it really became necessary. And I hear a really positive response from this applicant about their desire to be a good neighbor in this environment. And that also helps. That is a much appreciated thing. So I'm good with on the site issues, keeping those thoughts in mind.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, so I think we're all really concerned about being good neighbors and controlling the sound. And Phil, you've summed it up for us. Planning Commission is going to be handling the land use, its compatibility. We're just here to review site design, landscaping, fencing, screening, and architectural design. So at this point, I would say I'm okay with the plan as it is with the site design, but do want to reiterate that there is concern on the noise. Perhaps there's some type of sound mitigation we can do with the landscaping, fencing, screening, maybe a sound study, so that we're not directly impacting a community that wasn't prepared for this level of development, and really working to make sure everybody can function cohesively.
Okay. Let's go back to that slide. So the next discussion is just regarding the fencing and screening. So I'll go back to that slide. So these are the areas that show the fencing, and then these are the proposed types of fencing, as well as the different species used for landscaping. So I can go back and forth, but this might be easier to look at. So this is that decorative metal fencing around the front from Ramona. And then this would be that solid fencing that we want to see, not a stark white, but something more neutral color. And then this would be that vinyl chain link fence. And then we would require evergreen vegetation around the back here and here. But if there's any other comments or concerns from the DRC, those are what staff's looking for.
Are we creating a situation where you have vinyl chain link fencing without screening that's visible across the church parking lot?
No, so the vinyl screening would be here, and then there's already a lot of vegetation. So the actual fencing will be more visible for woods, but it will be pretty much invisible to the church.
Okay. And to the neighbors who are on the other side of the church that have sight lines in that direction, or sound lines. Okay.
Anyone else have input? I think, Mariah, what we're looking for is to make sure that we can, line of sight, we're controlling that, and that we're also giving that buffer. I think the more that we see closed fencing is going to create an environment that's going to keep some of the sound and the viewing of the other dogs away from the interactions that may increase the barking and other noise issues.
Sure. Okay. Let's see. And then that last point was about the architecture, the actual architecture of the building. Maybe, where was that? So here are those elevations, and I can go back to the materials as well, but there are a mix of materials and roof lines, and the colors will match the existing building, or the existing building will match this one. Either way, they'll be kind of a neutral light gray with, you can see that wainscoting along the bottom. I don't believe I mentioned that. So there's a little bit more detail there, and then these stucco columns as well. So from Ramona Road, there is a significant amount of architectural features that add some interest, but if the design review committee wants to add more input on things like colors or materials or anything like that, that would be the time.
Emily, you want to go ahead and comment?
I think for what the facility is and how it needs to function, the materials and the design presented makes sense, and I have no input. It's another place where I would defer to the architectural recommendations, and so what they've provided, I'm also comfortable with here.
Thank you. Jeff, speaking of architect.
My feelings are pretty much the same. Actually from Ramona, you could barely see the site with all the trees on there. So it's not going to be very visible. as you're coming down the street, so I don't have any real issues with the way that the design is. Actually, I think the woods in San Luis is very nice looking.
Thank you. Dennis?
I agree with both Jeff and Emily.
Thank you. Susan?
I concur. I appreciate the attention to keeping things off of refrigerator white and having the nicer, softer mix of colors that should blend in well and do good service to woods and to the community.
I'll give my 2 cents. I too agree. I do like its design. It looks like the applicant went to great levels to really give us something tangible to look at, and I have no changes at this time.
All right, great, thank you. So I kind of just want to go back over just some things so we make sure that we have sort of recommendations for the Planning Commission. Would the DRC like to require that noise study moving forward for the Planning Commission, or just a recommendation?
How do my colleagues feel?
Go ahead.
I think doing some due diligence would certainly make me feel better for the neighbors. I think that that might be the least that we could do to try as hard as we can to allay some concerns.
Thank you, Emily. Susan?
Yeah, if the architect were able to convince staff that there are some good backup options that would even further reduce noise options, sound walls or something around exercise yards or something, something else that, if it's in place and gets to be a problem, then we could skip the sound study. But otherwise, I think that there's real utility in that if you can reasonably assess or measure the sound, if you can do something that really makes sense and illuminates the issue, a sound study would be helpful. I think it's also useful for staff to review what kinds of sound complaints have and have not come in from the residential properties that are a similar distance away, but across from El Camino Real, from the El Camino Veterinary Hospital, and from the veterinary hospital on the other end of El Camino, closer to Kerberell, as I recall, that backs onto residential properties that would be uphill from it. I mean, understanding that the veterinary hospitals in those locations probably don't do much. I don't know how much outdoor activity they have with pets. Maybe some if they're kenneling the pets. So keeping that in mind, I think that there are a couple of situations we can learn from to get perspective on how this plays with the neighborhood.
Okay.
That was a complicated maybe.
Thank you.
Got it.
Dennis and
to me, I mean, there's ambient noise from the freeway. I live just as close as the Apple Valley does to the freeway, and I hear it all the time, but it's ambient, it's all the time. And so you become used to it. And here we're talking about, it's, dogs barking. It's like a clap, 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 clap happening at certain times. So if there is a noise study done, I'm wondering about where would the best place to perform the noise study? Would it be going up to Santa Cruz and looking at other dog facilities that are designed the same way as this, or other ones that are I mean, use the animal shelter right now in San Luis Obispo. I mean, that is loud. But based on all the comments that have been made, that is not what is going to occur here or what occurs at the Woods facility in San Luis Obispo. So to me, if we're going to ask the applicants to do a noise study, I mean, I think it really needs to be focused as to what's being measured. There's nothing to measure at this location that's compatible with dogs barking. So I'd be concerned about the right study being done.
Thank you, Dennis.
Time door. Now you have to.
I have to kind of weigh in with the same thing with Dennis. A typical sound study would not study the impacts of dark barking. It's a more of a constant noise type of situation. So it would have to be very specialized. And so I don't know how effective that might be. And I think it would be better if the architect could come up and have some potential ideas of how to mitigate the sound if it becomes a nuisance to the neighbors in the future.
Thank you. I'm gonna need a noise study at my house along with, I won't even get started. Anyways, I'm gonna say that it's up to the applicant and the city to work together to figure out what's the best way to approach the noise issue. Whether that's gonna be with maintaining the trees, the landscaping. Noise is our number one issue. We had 10 emails that came through on that. I wanna make sure that we're protecting the neighborhood. I wish that everybody could go and take a tour so that we could fully understand the difference of this design. It sounds amazing. I will be soon going to go take a tour now to really understand how they control their cats and their dogs and how that works with the neighborhood. So at this point, I think it's just a recommendation for noise addressing.
Just from staff level on the noise issue, we wouldn't know how to tell someone how to evaluate noise in this property either, but who would know that is an acoustic professional. And there are actually noise study analysts in our area that's what they do. They look at the situation, they look at the sensitive land use, they look at the potential noise source, and they come up with an acoustic analysis of appropriate mitigation measures based on what this building is, based on what the neighborhood is, and based on the proposed land use. And so that's something that could be accommodated here with an acoustic professional. Because myself, I couldn't tell you what to compare this to or how to do that on this particular property, but there are professionals that do have that level.
Yeah, and I think that's good guidance to work with the applicant, because I know in the past we have done, for example, we did it for a drive-through about a speaker, and that was pretty targeted. That was an acoustic study, but we've also had things where it tells us, you know, the noise a dog makes with the materials that are being used to soundproof the building, and then there's kind of a way to figure it that way. So maybe it is the flexibility. We can work with the applicant on what the best way to figure that out is.
Yeah, I comment that the noise study on the the drive-through order speaker that you mentioned, that that came as an appeal to council, was the basis of my decision on that appeal. That it solved the issue right away, because we were looking at sound that was 15 decibels by the time it made it to the back fence of the neighbor, and that was functionally half a whisper. So okay, we're done.
Mm-hmm.
But dogs, obviously you'll have more, and it will be coming in at moments. So but people have dogs. We just want to make sure that this is something that is not more intrusive than a neighbor with a couple of dogs.
Yeah, I was thinking about 1,000 chihuahuas. What do you think? Well, to answer the question, then it sounds like at least I, as a member of the committee, would recommend that a study be prepared.
Thank you. All right, Mariah, do you get where we're coming from in the committee and have our recommendations?
Yes, I think that's all I need unless there are any other comments or questions.
Susan, can you take over for me?
Sure.
I think that we don't have anything more on this topic, but Susan can go through the rest of the agenda for me.
Sure. They give noise challenges. We all have them.
It's a beautiful
okay.
noise.
Yes, it is a lovely noise. And dogs that are finding that are being well cared for and are going to happy homes, if it's not too much of a joyful noise, are also a joyful noise. So I will go back. So we're concluded with that item. And we're now on to committee member comments and reports. Do any committee members have anything on which they would like to comment or report? Seeing none, we'll move on to director's report. Director Dunsmore.
Thank you. Well, our next scheduled hearing is December 16th. If you're available for that hearing, we do have a couple items we'd like to bring you. One of those is the accessory dwelling unit stock plans. It'll be a first look at the designs for the stock plans that we've had a consultant working on, and that's in conjunction with the City of Grover Beach, City of Morro Bay, City of Rio Grande, kind of a regional effort. We got some grant funding for, and we've been working with the consultants on those plans and hope to share the first version of those with you and get some comments on those stock plans for accessory dwelling units. So that's something exciting. It might be coming along. First look at that. We also have a project called Emerald Court. It's 11 units. Do you think we'll have that ready to go for that date? Mariah, do you know it's the Laughlin project?
I do. I think that will be ready to go by then.
Awesome. Okay. So we have those two items for you. That is the 16th. That is right around the holiday season. So probably just want to do a head count, see if we're going to get a quorum for that particular hearing. And that's what's coming up this year. Other than that, I want to tell you happy Thanksgiving and ask you if you have any questions for me.
I may have I've got a problem right now with that date. I'm trying to see if I can move it. It's conflicting with work I have that comes from my responsibilities as chair of the county's Homeless Services Oversight Council.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to, in both cases, it's hard to find a slot for the group of folks involved, and those are meetings that have to move a little bit. So I'm trying to see if that meeting can move from the 2:30 to 4 slot, because I'm deeply interested in weighing in on those ADU plans. If not, I may come back and see if this meeting could move.
Okay.
Or if worst case, I can give some input on the ADU plans and the other offline.
Okay.
Are you accepting of one question on SB9?
One question on SB9, certainly.
How are SB9 lots going to be perfected? Will it be a parcel map, record of survey, certificate of compliance?
Well, we would like it to be recorded with a map. Certificates are always a little bit cloudy, right? But I don't know that we've actually finalized that level of recordation, how that will be done. We're working more on the front end process. And we'd see it, the back end process, the recordation process, to be exactly the same as any other 2-lot subdivision. So that part of it doesn't really change. What really changes with SB9 is the fact that they kind of override all of our front end subdivision regulation standards, such as minimum lot size, whether it's a discretionary action or not, you know, all of those kinds of requirements, but the actual recordation is the same as any other map. So could be a parcel map. I don't know that we do certificate. We typically allow certificates for lot line adjustments, but you know, maybe is that if that's part of our code now that we allow that, it's a potential.
I watched the very good seminar by Myers Nave, about an hour, 20-minute seminar on that. And I would suggest that everyone who's interested in that, watch that.
Oh, that's a good, yeah, that's
Thank
a
you.
good point. We've definitely been talking with all of our other local communities on SB 9, and City of Paso Robles is moving forward with an urgency ordinance on December 14th at their city council, the same night that we're doing ours. And we'll be giving you some more information as that unrolls. We're still going through the final details of that with our legal team.
Thank you.
Can you give us a brief update on the commercial project that this body looked at Santa Barbara Road and El Camino? I know those developers are really busy with a lot of things.
Yes,
so.
they have not resubmitted any new plans yet for that Dove Creek property at the corner of Santa Barbara and El Camino Real. So we're waiting for them to resubmit and see if they're going to move forward. They are very busy. They've got multiple other projects going. And our last communication, they did tell us they are very interested in continuing to pursue that. But they just need to resubmit that and some traffic information before we can move forward. So we're waiting on them.
Okay. And how's the general plan process getting ready to launch?
It's gonna start. We're starting. We're just finalizing our contract for the consultant. The consultant contract will be coming to the city council for their authorization on the consent calendar on December 14th. And even before that, we've already authorized them to start work on a small level on phase 1, because we're going to start with a city tour the first week of December with them. The consultant team will be here along with all the department heads. We're going to do a city tour with them just to really talk about the city form and just the different areas of the city and what's happening, so they can really kind of get their feet on the ground and start doing some analysis. So they have some good background information before we start heading into some scoping sessions with the city council and the planning commission and really talk about what this project's going to be about. But before they talk about what the project's going to be about, they want to get informed. They want to get the background information and do all their data collection so they can talk with an educated voice, you know, when we talk about scoping. So it's happening.
Very good. Any other questions for Director Dunsmore? If not, I hope everybody is able to get out and enjoy the fall festival this weekend. The first time I've ever seen a Ferris wheel at City Hall. So
it's pretty cool. We've been watching them assemble all those things over the last couple of days, and today it really got, I mean, as they kind of closed in on us today on City Hall, we realized, yeah, it's really happening. All these lights and colors. It's pretty neat. Yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you, everybody. And we stand adjourned until tentatively Thursday, December 16th.
Okay. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy
Thank you,
Happy
everybody.
Thanksgiving. Can you say goodbye?
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.